Hello, welcome to the Pivot Ability Show. Um, where do we begin? So this episode is going to be a short one. It's just me, my first solo episode. I'm not sure which order I'm going to release this one in. I feel like it makes the most sense as a very first episode, but we'll see. I wanted to talk about the show. Give you a quick background about myself, the purpose of this podcast, frequency and length that you can expect from my episodes, episode styles, who I'll be interviewing, and key themes that I really want to keep in mind throughout the entire show until there's, something else that comes up. So first off, I want to mention that the reason it's called the Pivot Ability Show is because I'm a person who likes to improvise quite a bit. I make decisions on the fly. I like to live life one decision at a time. So I pivot constantly, whether it's from travel plans or what I want to eat or the order of events I want to live my life in. That's just kind of very me. And I like it that way. So I want to make this show an extension of that. A little quick background about myself, just so you guys can know about me and, who I am and what I'm about. I like to always start my story with the fact that I was born in Mexico and raised in Texas. So what does that mean? It means I was raised in a Mexican home within a Texan/American environment, right? Spanish is actually my first language. I didn't start to learn English until I was 4, I think. According to me, when I went to pre-K, I could understand everything that they were saying, and I knew exactly what everything was about. And I never understood why they looked at me so confused. And now I know it's because I was talking to them in Spanish. So they were like, what? Anyway, so along with being in a Mexican home, I was also in a Christian home. I grew up in Houston itself. So to be specific, where in Texas, I went to grade school through 6th grade. Not grade school, sorry. I went to public school through 6th grade. So all of elementary was that. But then I think in 6th grade, my dad went to a parent-teacher conference, which he rarely went, but my mom was busy that night. So he went and he had a heart attack. He hated, I guess, I don't even know what to say. Like, he didn't like the people, to be quite frank. He felt like we could do better. And he didn't want me to be in that environment. So I think my parents had a conversation, um, probably that same night, and they decided that they were going to do whatever they could to either get me in a different school or different environment of some sorts. Anyway, so the result of that was that I ended up starting going to private school. I was able to get a scholarship. I was in San Antonio for 1 year, and it was my first year going to this different schooling system called, it's a curriculum called Accelerated Christian Education, so ACE. It's really peculiar in the sense that it's a self-taught environment. So basically, to put it in really simple terms, you're given a textbook broken down into like small segments, and you learn by reading. So you read, you teach yourself, you do your own homework, you grade your own work too. You test yourself to make sure that you're like learning the material. And then there's just one final test at the end to make sure that you can pass on to the next segment/grade level. It was a really valuable experience because I got to see that I'm capable of learning. Like, if you really want to learn something, you just got to pick up a book and learn about it. I'm not one to read. I don't like reading. I've been changing that this past year because I have again come into contact with the fact that this is a really valuable way of learning. But I also learned something that was kind of to my detriment, that no one is going to do the work for me. And also no one can force me to do anything that I don't want to do. So when I reached my adolescence, I kind of rebelled. It wasn't like an intentional rebellion. It was just like, I don't feel like doing it, therefore I'm not going to do it. And you can take my phone away. You can ground me in all the ways you can think of. But if I don't feel like doing it, I'm not going to do it. Like, right, no one else is going to absorb information for you. No one else is going to read for you. No one else is going to process for you. And so it became like a very powerful thing, kind of. It empowered me to my detriment at that point. But as I grew older and matured a bit, I also realized that I'm also in control of how fast I can advance, right? I can choose to learn fast. I can choose to adopt new concepts. I can choose to implement things quickly and grow. So it was a double-edged sword, but that was that. So I continued going to this ACE, like self-taught school until 11th grade. And then 12th grade, I went to a college prep school. And being at that school that year felt very liberating because I got to try my hand at a bunch of new things. I got to participate in swimming and on track. I was last place every time because I'm not an athlete, but there's that. I got to participate in like creative things too. Had a graphic design class. What else? And it was a nice year. I was already tired of the environment that I had been in for the past few years because in this self-taught environment, I was also part of a very, very, very small school. So I had the same classmates and the same teacher every year, every day, all day, all year. Like nothing would change. So anyway, there's a little bit about my schooling. After graduating high school, I started going to work part-time and college part-time. I started in community college, and I decided that I wanted to self-fund my college career. My parents had already spent quite a bit on my brothers, and I'm so much younger than they are. So I didn't want them to worry about me. I don't know, they would have happily, participated in paying for my tuition, but I don't know. I kind of wanted to do it my own way. And that meant going to school part-time so that I could work part-time. Well, after a few years of doing that, I realized, and well, that plus the fact that we had a shift in our family. My parents had to move back to Mexico for some time for health reasons. And that left me in charge of our manufacturing company. And that was a position I really did not want to be in, especially at 20 years old with no experience. What felt like little to no guidance because my parents were just far away and occupied with, more important matters. My brothers were still involved, but I was the one who needed to kind of like lead the way in the financial department. They were more involved in other segments of the business. And I felt like it was up to me to not run this place into the ground, right? It was a lot of pressure and a huge learning lesson. I thought that I could still continue schooling. So I kept going to school every semester. But after a few failed semesters, like either withdrawing or getting poor grades, usually withdrawing because I didn't like having poor grades, um, I finally accepted the fact that even though I think I can, the truth is I can't, right? Because at some point in the semester, I would have to pick my priorities, right? My priority was work. I had to keep this business afloat. And I didn't have the systems, structure, knowledge, experience, maturity, discipline in place to do both. So that led me to telling myself I'm going to take a year off from school and I will focus all of my time and energy on this business, making sure that I can get it up and running so that I don't have to be like there day in and day out and I can just supervise from afar. So I did that. Thankfully, I'm very stubborn, and I have some sort of like pride in saying that I graduated. I didn't care to graduate. I just wanted to get the brownie points to say that I did it. So that stubbornness was what led me to going back to school. I went back to school full time. I was 24 at that point. I felt really behind because all of my peers from high school and grade school and stuff, they were long gone graduated, right? They all had their jobs. I would see their lives from social media and think like, man, I am behind. But I kept going. So I decided to pursue math because it was a very broad thing. I like to, the way I've always lived my life is I like to set myself up for like the majority of options possible. Um, I like to know that I have like a really solid foundation and that I can move in any direction at any given point. I don't want to corner myself in to thinking I can only do chemical engineering, or I can only be an architect, or, I can only be an accountant. I needed to do something that was really broad. So I chose mathematics. After my first full semester with the math program, I realized that I don't want to do that because it was very theory heavy. And even though I love math, like, cool story, bro, about your theory, like, I wasn't that interested. One of my friends was a civil engineer, and he mentioned that if I already like math that much, why don't I just go for engineering? And again, it's because I didn't want to feel cornered. So I was like, you have a point. I looked into what engineering options there were, and I found industrial engineering. It's like a very business oriented engineering field. It's all about systems. It's applicable to absolutely every field because it's about processes, right? Systems and processes. Everything has a system and process, like tangibles, intangibles. If you want to look at it from like a numerical standpoint, from a creative standpoint, everything has a system and process. So I was like, this is perfect. I went into industrial engineering. It was going to give me an additional year of schooling, and I was like, absolutely not. I was so done with school already. All I wanted to be was out. Like, give me a piece of paper that says I can get a job and we'll call it a day. So thankfully I found kind of like a loophole. I did what was it, university studies, and then I had to have two minors with that. So one of my minors was industrial engineering. And when I saw the curriculum and the classes that I had to take, I was like, this is perfect. I have to take all of the important industrial engineering classes and I get to skip the ones that I don't care about. Like, throughout my entire college career, I always had at least two jobs. In some cases, I had three, and just going to school full time or part time. Um, and because of that, I was just so tired. I was so tired. Like, I hear of these kids who have jobs and they're in sports and they're in school and they're like crushing it. And I'm just like, wow, like, can't relate. It could not be me. Um, the reason I'm mentioning this is because I ended up graduating with a 2.7, I think, GPA. And it's not because I didn't get good grades. I usually got A's on everything, but I would turn it in so late, that I would get just an enormous amount of points docked. And this like goes back to the whole, like, you can't force me to do anything I don't want to do. Like, it's a double-edged sword. It really is. So with that grade, I was like, I really have to rely on my work experience. Like, with that GPA, sorry. So this work experience is all I have to fall back on to convince people that I am worth hiring. But when I started applying to jobs, I decided that I was going to have whatever GPA they wanted me to have. So any application that I like submitted, I was like, what is your minimum GPA requirement? 3.5? I've got a 3.5. What is it? 3.0? I got a 3.0. Like, no problem. I figured, like, by the time they decide that they want to work with me, they won't care about my actual GPA. So I applied to a bunch of jobs. Growing up in Houston, I had been in like the oil and gas capital, and I had seen through my life at that point already, I think, 3 downturns where just like the whole city went like crazy because everyone was getting laid off. And I was like, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to be in oil and gas. I don't like it. It's a really attractive industry, or at least it was when I was growing up, because there's a lot of money to be made in oil and gas. So I was like, I would rather make less money and have job security than be in oil and gas. So I was intentionally skipping oil and gas companies when I was applying. I was also very well versed in the food manufacturing world. So I wanted to chase more opportunities in that segment. I also was looking for some things in finance and transportation and logistics. Well, one day I get an email from a company that is in oil and gas, and it said that I had made it to my first round of interviews, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I did not apply for this. But long story short, I went through a few interviews with them and I got an offer, and I was like, well, I mean, it's a good opportunity. And again, like this pride, man, I was like, I'll get like really cool brownie points for saying that I worked for this company. Like, that's exciting. So I went with it. I started working with them as a product engineer. Um, and I didn't like it. So when I started, I was like, this doesn't feel right. And I figured it didn't feel right because it was really challenging. It was a very foreign concept to me. I didn't understand a lot of the terminology. I didn't feel like I was as prepared as, other peers who were also just starting. Most of them were petroleum engineers. So I just felt out of place, but I kept going with it because I didn't want to back down from this challenge. I had a track record of quitting whenever things got hard, and I was trying to break through that. I think college was the second thing that I didn't quit. So I was like, well, let's add one more thing to this. And I stuck with it. And I had an opportunity to move to a different city. I'm in Denver now. Um, and I got to work with a really cool team, but I just never quite liked it. Every time I would go to trainings, I would see that other people were more excited to learn this new material than I was, and I felt, again, out of place and like I didn't really belong. So that paired with other personal issues made me feel really burnt out. I had been on the go for a very long time. I had been uh, I would say overworking myself for a very long time. And this was the first time that I was no longer being overworked, but I was miserable because I did not feel fulfilled. I did not like the things that I had to do day in and day out, even though they were really simple and honestly mundane. Um, I just wasn't getting any fulfillment from it. And it led me to hating the the weekdays. Yeah. So I would work Monday through Friday. Saturday, I would spend all day recovering from the fact that I had to go to work. And then Sunday, I would spend all day preparing for the fact that I would have to go to work. And it sounds really illogical because all in all, like the work wasn't crazy. It was fine. It was, I think, kind of an easy job. But mentally, I was just drained. I could not handle it emotionally or mentally. After being in Denver for 1 year, I was able to buy my first investment property. I had learned that housing and transportation are your biggest expenses. And if you want to save on anything, those are the ones you should focus on. So I figured I can get an investment property and do something called house hacking. What that means is you buy a house, you live in a room, and you rent out all the other rooms. So because of that, because of the job, I was able to get the house. And because of the house, I was able to live rent and mortgage free. I felt secure in order to take this medical leave that I needed for depression. Um, I was out of work for 14 weeks. 4 of those weeks were paid, and then the other 10 were not. So those 10 weeks taught me that I will be okay. I'll survive. um, and that after that, I went back to work and I tried to give it my all. And after a few weeks, I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I ended up leaving my job. Currently, I'm not working anywhere. I have a startup business that I started, like 6 months ago. And I'm giving it my all. I'm going to do that until I either run out of money or make a bunch of it. So follow along for more. So that's just not that quick of a recap, but a 20-minute recap about my entire story, where I come from, where I'm at. And now I do want to get into the podcast itself. So as I mentioned, it's the Pivotability podcast because I want to talk about pivoting and all of the decisions that come with that, the circumstances that lead up to that point. And one of my interviews that I've done so far, my friend asked me, he was like, well, what's your target audience? Like, what are you trying to get to? And I really appreciate him for asking me this because I understood that I'm trying to provide a space or a platform where people can tune in and know what to do next. Like if you resonate with someone's story, if you connect with, what someone is saying or feeling lost or at a crossroads or wanting a radical change or needing, to pivot in some way, having a way to do it. When I got my first corporate job, I had more money than I had ever had, that I knew what to do with. And it wasn't a lot, by just average means, but it was more than ever had access to. So I'm trying to figure out how to set myself up for financial success. And every place that I turn to, I can't find help because I'm not good enough, right? I don't have enough money. I'm not rich enough. I'm not resourceful enough. I don't have enough knowledge. And I'm getting turned down by the people that I'm trying to turn to get some guidance. So I want to be able to have this place for that person who maybe doesn't need just financial advice, but who needs life advice about what to do next. Or, maybe I'll speak to parents, right? And get to hear about how they have pivoted in their parenting style, or entrepreneurs, travelers, just all kinds of people. And maybe you, my listener, can resonate with their stories and learn a little bit about what your options are. So with that said, the frequency and length, I'm expecting to release one episode a week. And the length of the episodes will depend on the kind of episode, but I'm assuming it'll be between 30 minutes and maybe an hour and 20-ish. I don't want it to be too long, but depending on the kind of episode is, what that length will be. So kinds of episodes, I have 4 main ones. Interviews. So the kinds of guests you can expect to hear from are people that I encounter given where I'm at in life. So currently, my main hobbies are dancing, investing, and traveling. So you can expect to hear from a lot of dancers, investors, and travelers. I've found myself in really wonderful circles with lots of entrepreneurs who have very unique stories. So they'll be coming on and sharing their stories, how they got from A to B, transitional moments in their lives, all that good stuff. And then I'll have some solo episodes like this one. I think it'll be mostly me just talking about, what I've got going on in life, maybe some strategy that I've been thinking of to move forward and what to do. I will also have some co-hosting episodes. So maybe some of the people that I interview, I can invite them back on so that we can talk about a specific topic, and, bounce ideas off of each other. And then lastly, there's something called Decade Dialogue. Originally, that's what I wanted my podcast to be about. Basically, it's just 2 people having a conversation. I would be one of them because I'm the host. And really, it would just be fly on the wall conversations, right? You as a listener get to hear what me and X person talk about, whether it's, life stuff, family stuff, relationships, dating, dogs, parenting, whatever it is that I usually talk about with people that I come across. No context, no backstory, no explanation, just diving right into this random conversation. And I don't know, I feel like it would be entertaining. I would most likely have a rapid fire element at the very end where I ask them some formational questions about themselves, where they get to share I guess, a little bit about themselves, and you as a listener can understand them a bit better. Oh, well, no wonder they sound like that. Of course, they're they sound like the oldest child. Of course, they're that responsible, right? Just random things like that. Okay. And then the last thing I want to touch on are key themes. So these are the things that I have found I am really passionate about. I would say it's really my value system at the moment. And I want to have the most raw, authentic, human experience possible in the entirety of this show. People showing up as themselves, with their true interests, with their true opinions, being able to be free and express themselves and feel comfortable. And ideally, we will be centering a lot of our conversations around the thoughts of freedom, flexibility, financial independence, fulfillment, and faith. A little bit about each of those. So freedom in every way. whether it's where you live, whether it's finances, whether it's, I don't know, time, what you want to do with your time, being free to do what you want to do with your time. Flexibility, all about pivoting, right? Having options. Like, I can be here this day, or I can do this thing that time, at that time, or, completely switching it around. Honestly, it can even be physical. Like, I have found this year that being flexible gives me, like, I'm working on my flexibility, and it gives me more ability to move, and it makes it easier to just create movement in my everyday. Financial independence, I think, is such an important thing for anyone. It wasn't until I did get my corporate job that I had money to pay off my debt, that I had money to save for a down payment on a house, that I realized I like we spend so much time, especially whenever we're like in middle class families, worrying about what we're going to do next month financially, right? Or how we're going to pay off this debt, or how we're going to buy this new thing. Worrying about our resources, I would say. And then after unlocking financial freedom or financial independence, because I wouldn't say I'm financially free yet, I got to focus on other things like happiness and self-care, being the best version of myself. What does that mean? What does that look like? What do I want her to be? And then the last two things are fulfillment and faith. So fulfillment goes, I think, in line with the financial independence thing of like, what is fulfilling to me? What kind of activities do I want to do? Like, where do I want to spend my time? What are the people I want to be surrounded by? Who are they? How do I get in those circles? And how can I give back? How can I live a fulfilling life? How can I give back to others and be of value to the people that I interact with? Lastly, faith. I was really hesitant on including that because I want to be so like raw and authentic, but I'm right now in the process of working my way back to the church, working my way back to Christ, having a newfound relationship with the Lord. And that comes from several years. Like, I grew up in a Christian home, so I'm familiar with it, but I think throughout my 20s, I really steered away from it. I was never like completely turned off by it at all, but I was no longer focused on that. I wasn't focused on, praising the Lord. I wasn't focused on living a godly life. I think I was more focused on earthly pleasures and what I wanted to do with my time and my plans. And I think I have finally reached the point where I'm understanding that my way is not the best way. And that I'm really missing this greater peace in my life. So, yeah, I want to share about that. Some of the people that I come across in church who I think are worth interviewing, I would love to have them on and share their experience with their faith. And I think I want to emphasize in this point that I want to be very human, very authentic, very transparent through and through. And that will sometimes mean that I won't make sense, because that's who I am. I am a free-flowing spirit, and I like to consider new ideas and, can think about them and maybe form an opinion at some point. I like to live life a really kind of strange way, or at least I think it's kind of strange. And I don't want to hide that. I want to be able to show up as me on this show. So anyway, that's enough of me. That's enough of this rambling. I hope you guys enjoy the show. I hope you guys enjoy all of the guests that come on and all of the topics that'll be covered. I would really appreciate if you guys could leave me a review, rate the show, especially if you write me a review, whether it be on Apple or Spotify. That really helps with getting the show out to more people and having a greater reach. All right, until next time.